Good afternoon or evening, everybody. Welcome back to another weather forecast by Adrian's Weather Forecast. And we have a very interesting and exciting upload for those who love the snow, as we are watching out for the possibility for our first widespread snowstorm later next week here. There has been a lot of consistency within the past few global models, so we are definitely watch out for the possibility as this trough moves in that we're currently seeing in the northwest pushes southward. We're going to watch out the possibility of potential for a large midwestern snowstorm that could very well bring in a good amount of snow later next week here. So if you are in the Midwest and interested when you can get your first snow and you are liking this so-called rain to your ears, then I recommend you guys watch this video and as well share it to anyone that you know would be interested in this video. As well, if you have not already done so, you are new to the channel, I would recommend you guys subscribe as I do daily content. But without further ado, let's get in the video. So let's now get a look at the medium range forecast here in the surface analysis. So here's the overall look at day 5, which will obviously be November 10th. Obviously, so here's the overall trough we're watching out for basically around a open wave, possibly even a negative tilted trough. There you see the trough right here, kind of breaking like that. It's going to be basically centered across the northwest, but we're going to be seeing a prefrontal system as we're going to be seeing a pretty large low pressure there with a pretty significant cold front obviously on the lower end of the system with a slight warm front and then another cold front stretching out into the northeast here. So we're going to be seeing a lot of cold air coming in from British Columbia and the Sierras. At this point, by November 10th, this cold air will be reaching the southeastern Rockies and the Four Corners states and even reaching portions of the plains. And then we kind of have an occluded front towards the north, and of course a slight warm front towards the north. But as we get towards day 6, we're going to be seeing a really large, obviously, progression. We're going to be seeing a second low pressure, and it's going to be low pressure right here. This will be November 11th. We're going to be seeing a second low pressure developing, and that was going to kind of follow the crest of the cold front by day 7. And there it is right there by day 7. It's going to kind of follow the crest of that cold front. And here's the actual trough. The trough is going to be basically right here, so you can kind of tell it is going to be basically open wave, just with the way you see the overall iso lines. Obviously it's kind of basically it's, I say, basically symmetrical, so that's really the reason why we can tell this is going to be more of an open wave trough other than a negative tilted trough. So we're going to be seeing a really large cold front kind of basically stretching its way all the way from the western United States down into portions of the Midwest. That's going to allow for, as we see this moisture ejection or advection coming from the Gulf of Mexico, as we see that kind of troughing as well, that advection from the Gulf of Mexico moisture, that's going to kind of make its way and kind of meet that cold front as it pushes south, where that cold south air, and that's going to allow for relative moisture advection, etc. from this multiple of these fronts. That's going to allow for the potential for a snowstorm to develop as we're seeing some really cold air, and there's not going to be any issues with this cold front having to catch up with this. As well, seeing a pretty widespread cold front going deep into portions of the Gulf of Mexico, so we're going to be seeing cold air already as we're going to be seeing a prefrontal system ahead of that trough. So definitely seeing really good setup for day 6 and 7 leading up towards that snowstorm. So let's now get a look at the overall 500 millibar on MSLP. So obviously here's a setup for November 5th, which is obviously today. So we're missing some pretty strong ridging across portions of the central United States, but we're not going to be focusing on that. So as we now get towards the early part of next week, we're going to start to see a trough starting to build its way in towards the northwest. It's going to actually allow you can overall see the shape of this kind of dip in the jet stream. It's not very significant, but you can kind of notice it by November 10th. We're going to be seeing that main trough going to be centered across portions of Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming, and then the cold front's going to actually be kind of making its way towards Texas by November 10th. So we are actually going to be watching out for some rocky snow, as we're going to be seeing some obviously a dip in the jet stream, and it's going to allow for some really strong ridging. So it's going to be a very warm week for much of the week for the southeast and mid-Atlantic. We're going to start to see a cool down by November 10th. Again, going to start seeing some snow across the Rockies and even possibly as far south as the Texas Panhandle. But look, as we get towards November 11th and then start to see now November 12th, this low pressure starts to steepen here, and it's going to allow for a chance of a really strong and as well kind of you can kind of see a really strong and rigorous type trough setup. So there's the trough right here. Basically, it's going to be open wave, and they're going to be seeing the cold front itself kind of dipping down like that. It's going to be the actual cold front itself, and they're going to be seeing obviously a lot of that moisture convection. So really good set. This is a really steep low right here at 990 millibars. And as we continue on, it's going to be getting as low as 989, 988, and even 987. So really good setup for the Midwest and as well a portion of the North Central and Great Lakes for some snow to begin. Basically from the 14th to 15th to probably even the 16th with that really rigorous cold air, and of course really intense dip in the jet stream here. There you see now a strong ridge setup here across the west, and then high pressure now making its way towards the east. This actually allow for some cooler air to make its way by the end of next week across the east United States, but gonna allow for a really warm start to the week for the east. But really good again, steepening low. Low pressure will be just getting stronger, and as it meets obviously that moisture advection as well with that cold air, definitely a chance for a pretty large and significant cold front. But here's a look at the actual 2-meter temperature anomalies. Like I said, we're going to be seeing a pretty warm start towards the week here for the east and central United States, as we're going to be seeing a pretty intense ridge as this trough is still pretty far into the west across the Rockies. So it's going to allow for that kind of high pressure to really kind of build up and strengthen. But as the day after, we're going to be seeing a very intense and kind of out of nowhere cold front as this trough quickly makes its way towards the east here. And we're going to be seeing that really intense kind of prefrontal system kind of developing ahead of the actual front itself. So we're going to be kind of seeing the main low pressure right here, and then we have a second low pressure developing down here. And that's going to allow for that huge, just all of a sudden surge of colder air. So we are going to be seeing a pretty disorganized type snowstorm setup because the intense different and temperature gradient difference between the western Midwest and kind of the Great Lakes. So we're going to start to see a pretty disorganized and lopsided type snowstorm. It's going to most likely be just for kind of Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, and portions of the Dakotas, and not as much involved in Indiana, eastern Wisconsin, Michigan, because the intense warm front we're seeing here and the temperature gradient difference because of this rapid, all of a sudden cold front really catching up towards the actual front itself and toward the actual trough. So that's going to allow for that really one-sided type snowstorm. So let's get a look here at what the GFS wants to have for us. So let's now get towards really November 9th, per se, November 10th. So obviously at this point, the cold front's going to be far towards the Rockies and portions of the Sierras, and that trough still basically near Seattle and near Portland. But as we get towards November 10th, this trough obviously starts to make its way and merge further to the southeast. And as we see that second low pressure and this also low pressure kind of developing towards the Texas Panhandle, that's going to allow for some moisture to stay across the four corner states and allow for some decent snow November 10th into the 11th for portions of the lower Rockies. But again, here's that main low pressure. Basically, this is going to be the main low pressure. Obviously, the trough will be further towards the north, and then we have a second low pressure across Oklahoma developing on November 11th. And of course, there we see this front right here along the cold front. We're going to be seeing a lot of moisture along this cold front. Obviously, this main low pressure is going to be right here in center near Duluth, Minnesota. And like I did say, it's going to be very one-sided and lopsided. So basically, due to the overall temperature gradient difference kind of into the center of this trough, a lot of the snow is going to stay basically west of the low pressure and kind of a little bit closer towards the western side of that trough where that cold air is actually really where we see that cold air advection, because kind of towards this vicinity, we're going to be seeing basically a warm air advection just ahead of that cold front. So we're going to be seeing some really basically warm to chilly rain, quickly cooling temperature across the Mississippi River Valley at this point on the 11th. But of course, really good snow. That's going to actually, with the leftover moisture and that extreme cold air, of course, the cold air is going to be far into the southeast at this point. Going to be seeing really scattered moisture left over. It's going to allow for some chance of some widespread snow showers to stay even affecting Chicago, Milwaukee, portions there, maybe Traverse City, Duluth, Minnesota, Fargo, North Dakota. And it's just going to stay there as we still have a remaining low pressure, but that's going to most likely end by November 13th. But some really good intense snow likely for a portion there of maybe Duluth, Minnesota, Rochester, specifically there into the Minnesota and Wisconsin border, because they're basically right next to that low pressure right there, but they're on the western side. So as this low pressure steepens, we're going to be seeing some really heavy precipitation. So really going to be watching out for the main bullseye area according to the GFS, basically across the eastern side of Minnesota and western side of Wisconsin. Let's now get a look here at what the European and CMC have to say. So let's see what the CMC has to say. So obviously by November, let's actually go to the 10th again. So obviously as this cold front starts to basically, it's going to be placed right here down, getting close to Texas. It's going to be seeing that really cold air and moisture left over behind from that from the main system, which obviously kind of started really steep low pressure out the northwest and Pacific Northwest. That's going to leave over some widespread scattered showers and snow across Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, and Utah. Could see some pretty widespread snow, and as well some heavy snow. The CMC is actually picking up a lot more potential for some snow across these areas in the GFS. Even getting some snow there for Rapid City, as well as some good snow now closer to Gillette, and maybe some flurries towards Colorado Springs. But here are the two. This could kind of be the line here, the front of these three low pressure line for some widespread moisture. But here's going to be the main system right there. So as this cold front really makes its way towards kind of along this front right here, there's going to be the main low pressure with kind of that conveyor belt type system here. It's going to kind of most likely be like a conveyor belt system where you see kind of a lot of this moisture and kind of the warm air advection kind of rising like this, and you see the kind of the cold air kind of going to be wrapping around like that. It's going to kind of be the cold air. Basically, this is going to be a very similar type system to a conveyor belt system where you see obviously getting that really long front and then looping like that is typically what a conveyor belt system would look like, and that's what the CMC is hitting towards. But there you see low pressure number two, and then main low pressure right here. So obviously as this cold air makes its way towards North Dakota and towards the actual trough itself, this we're going to see some snow developing towards Bismarck and as well towards portions there of east central North Dakota, and then even seeing some snow possible across the North Texas Panhandle and to areas of the western Panhandle of Oklahoma. Could see some snow for Amarillo, some snow possible there for towards east central, or not east central, for west central Oklahoma Panhandle. So could see some snow in that general vicinity very soon here. And of course there's that really along the actual front itself some pretty warm air as a result of that rapid or that pretty I say drastic change in the temperature gradient. So it's going to allow for a lot of rain. I mean a lot of rain for a portion there of the lower Mississippi River Valley. And then of course as this cold front finally starts to catch up towards the actual low pressure itself, that's where we're going to be seeing some really heavy snow. The CMC is really going absolutely crazy for Minneapolis, the Twin Cities, as well across much of east central Minnesota, even portions of Iowa getting absolutely hammered. So the CMC is having a very similar type pattern, but a little bit more distributed, a little bit more, I'd say, organized, while of course you see that really warm air across the east central United States at this point. But as we get towards Saturday and the weekend, we'll see a cool off. But looking at some really heavy snow, we're talking some really heavy snow for areas near the Twin Cities, Duluth, Minnesota, Devil's Lake, Minnesota, Rochester, as well, getting some really heavy snow there across portions of Sioux Falls, Iowa, even maybe a chance for some snow across Des Moines, Iowa City, Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and then it quickly moves out as this front is quickly pushed out by basically a ridge there. But definitely watching that, maybe some blues there across Jordan. It's gonna be really interesting there. But again, CMC is showing a little bit less of a little bit more organized of a system, to say the least. Let's now get a look at what the GFS has to say for the actual snow accumulation itself. This is by November 14th, and everything's all done and set. Of course, a lot of this accumulation actually adds on. You can kind of see the main system kind of ends towards really Friday, and then we see the next 2 days of heavy snow, scattered showers. But here's the overall look. If we actually end it by basically, if we actually end it towards, let's say, Saturday, we're looking at some really heavy snow across north central Minnesota, getting up to possibly 2 feet, and then seeing some really good snow, like I said, for east central Minnesota and western Wisconsin. Could see possibly nearly a foot near areas near Rochester. But look at the widespread amount of snow. I mean, this is a lot more widespread because the front here in the GFS doesn't move as quickly, while the CMC is basically pushed down and forced out. So we're going to be seeing whatever leftover moisture in the GFS is going to be absolutely frozen because of the extreme cold front how deep it's going to be in the cold front by the time it gets towards Saturday. So it actually has up to nearly an inch near Rockford, Chicago, or not Rockford, Chicago, Rockford, Illinois, and even getting some accumulation down near Lansing, some accumulation there near northern Missouri. So seeing some widespread grays and traces that the CMC is not really holding on to. So the actual timing of when the front gets kicked down, when the low pressure is kind of moving forward across the Great Lakes, that's going to be something to watch out for. But seeing widespread snow from the Dakota region all the way into areas of Michigan, actually getting up to nearly 5 inches near portions of basically portions, I'd say, from Traverse City towards kind of let's see, let me try to think the city name near just outside Kalamazoo into their portions of east or west central Michigan. I'm trying to think of that city there. I'm not sure why I can't think of it. I think I'll think about it someday down the road. But this is what the GFS is doing. Obviously, mainly the bullseye is going to be Minnesota, Wisconsin, while the CMC is taking a little bit more of a different approach. So here's the CMC, completely different here. I mean, obviously, really a lot more widespread snow in the Rockies. You can just tell the difference here. I mean, look at this difference. Look at the Rockies. This is the GFS. I mean, let me just highlight this real quick so you can kind of see Yellowstone getting some good snow, some good snows across the Utah Rockies, and then some snow just outside of the main port. This is kind of the main area for the GFS showing, kind of built like a cat. And look at the CMC. It's a lot more widespread, actually, including Montana, Wyoming, as well, getting some snow into portions of the Texas Panhandle and Oklahoma Panhandle, getting as high as possibly 4 inches, but seeing some really good snow across the areas of west central Colorado, some really, really good snow for Yellowstone, getting over basically 4.5 feet. But look at this. This is obviously, like I said, a lot more organized and a little bit more of a November type pattern, if to say the least, but having some very slight accumulation and trace across Wisconsin and then in Chicago, but a lot less widespread, because you can tell that no longer are we having 5 inches near Michigan, actually having basically nothing whatsoever. It's a little bit more centered as well towards Iowa. Let me actually circle the trace of the area behind the actual advection line and convergence line. That's where most of that snow is going to be. You can kind of see the difference between the GFS and the CMC. I actually think the CMC is a little bit more, I'd say, a little bit more reasonable, as well as seeing an absolute bullseye across east central Michigan, or Minnesota, sorry, up to maybe a foot. And look at the Twin Cities, may get anywhere from 2 to 7 inches here, as well west central Iowa getting basically a ton of snow, possibly nearly half a foot across some areas, while the GFS has them basically getting the same total as they have Rockford getting. So definitely very, very intriguing system here, and it's definitely going to be exciting as we get better answers as we get closer.